Goodbye, I Love You. A short piece from the short story collection When Heroes Rise by Trevor Bierschbach. The ribbons of smoke drifted lazily through the air in an old farmhouse's kitchen. Olive appliances and yellow linoleum showed the ravages of time in the dim glow of the stove light. Ice clinked in a glass of bourbon when the old man set it on the worn tabletop. A lighter clicked, and the stranger at the other end of the table lit another expensive cigarette. "Those are bad for you," the old man said. His voice was weak, not as strong as it had been years before. Shoulders shrugged under a black suit coat opposite the old man. "I'll live," the stranger said, "so to speak." The stranger's voice sounded bored, like someone who had been working the same job he hated for 30 years. "Well, they're bad for me, then," the old man's cough accentuated his point. The stranger flicked his ash into an old cut glass ashtray and raised the cigarette to his lips again. "We both know it's too late for that," the stranger said before taking a drag. The ashtray was stained with the dregs of many years of use, though that night was the first in a long time the old man had pulled it out of the cupboard. "Why are you here?" the old man asked. "I've told you why." "I mean, why now?" the old man asked plaintively. "I'm not ready." "You've had more time than most," the stranger said. "I'm scared." "After all these years? I don't believe you." The old man looked down at the glass on the table. The stranger was right. He had been a soldier, firefighter, and raised 3 kids. Little scared him any more. He was bothered by the stranger, though. A feeling tugged at the pit of his stomach, but it was something other than fear. "You've avoided this talk many times over the years," the stranger said. "We can't put it off any longer." "At Cherbourg," the old man said. His eyes had grown distant and his ears filled with the reports of long silent guns. Like many of his generation, no amount of time would erase those memories. "And Bastogne, and that factory on Fifth," the stranger said, "along with 6 other times." The old man shook his head, returning to the present. He lifted the glass with a shaking hand and took a drink. The stranger watched him for a moment, as if waiting for him to say something. When the old man remained silent, he snuffed out his cigarette and stood. His chair scraped against the floor as it slid back. The sound caused the old man to start. "Well, it's time we were on our way," the stranger said. "Wait." The stranger paused, a note of interest in his eyes. The light never seemed to hit his face, but his eyes always reflected the glow regardless of where he turned. "Isn't there something I can give you?" The old man was begging now. "Something I can trade for more time." "What could you possibly have that I need?" "I'll give you anything." "Will you?" the stranger asked. The old man felt a chill creep up his spine. He knew what the stranger dealt in and what his job was. He thought of his wife, his kids, and their kids, and he knew he was unwilling to make such a deal. No, I won't," the old man said. His stooped shoulders slumped in defeat. He steeled himself to stand and leave with the stranger, but he stopped and looked at the ceiling. His wife of over 50 years was asleep in the bedroom above. They married after the war and bought the farmhouse they still lived in. Together they raised their children in that house and helped raise many grandchildren there as well. The best memories of over half his life were with his family in their house. In a flash he knew what it was that had been bothering him. "Let me say goodbye," he said to the stranger. "Give me one night to tell her I love her." The stranger looked at him for a few moments. There was no plea this time, just an honest request from the heart. The stranger rarely heard such requests. He nodded and put his cigarette in his pocket. "One night," the stranger said, and walked to the door. He was gone before the old man could stand and turn around. The old man finished his drink and set the glass on the counter. He climbed the stairs slowly, grimacing at the pain in his knees and back. The door at the top of the stairs creaked when he pushed it open. "Couldn't sleep?" his wife asked drowsily. She rolled toward him, and the dim moonlight from the window fell across her features. They were both old. Time, worry, stress, and life had taken all their toll, but he was struck by how beautiful she still was to him. "What's the matter?" she asked. He was aware he had been staring. "Nothing, he stammered, reminded of the first time he saw her. It had taken some time to build up the nerve to go talk to her then. "I love you." I love you too. Now come to bed. It's cold, she said, shaking her head and smiling at him. He pulled his feet out of his slippers and climbed under the sheets next to her. She snuggled close, and he put his arm around her. She shivered, but soon warmed up in his embrace. He laid his head down and took in the scent of her hair, the smell of the shampoo she always used and the perfume she always wore. That's better, she said quietly. Don't go anywhere. I'll always be with you, dear, he said. Her breathing settled into a steady rhythm as she fell asleep again. He lay awake the rest of the night. He listened to the sounds of the old house around them and the world outside, and the steady breathing of his lifelong love beside him. Finally, as the dawn began to lighten the drapes, he sighed and closed his eyes. The funeral, 2 days later, was held during a beautiful afternoon. An old woman stood at a newly dug grave in the middle of a beautiful military cemetery. The old woman was among children and grandchildren, friends and family, while her lifelong love was lowered to his rest. She shed no tears, though she was sad. She was thankful he had peace at the end and remembered what he had said to her last. He would always be with her. Her son was walking her to the car when she saw a stranger in a black suit. He was leaning against a tree, smoking an expensive cigarette. She remembered seeing him watching the service. Did you know him? She asked the stranger when they were close. We were acquainted, the stranger said. He was a good man. The old woman smiled. That's kind of you to say. Will you come to the house for coffee? Not today, but I'll call on you before long, the stranger said. All right, then, she smiled. You come by soon, and we'll swap stories about the old rascal. He nodded and put the cigarette out under his shoe. I wouldn't miss it for anything. That was Goodbye, I Love You, from the short story collection When Heroes Rise, which is available at the link in the video description below, including directly from me at the eBay store. Thank you for listening.